the vast expanse of the Andromeda Galaxy, the exploration vessel Odyssey glided silently through the stars. On board, Lieutenant Jake Carter reviewed the latest data from their recent planetary survey. Earth had sent him and his team on a mission to establish potential alliances and discover new resources that could benefit humanity. Little did he know, his most extraordinary discovery was about to unfold. As Jake sifted through the holographic displays in the dimly lit control room, an alarm blared suddenly, flooding the space with red light. He jumped to his feet, his heart pounding against his chest. "Commander, we're detecting an unidentified spacecraft approaching at high velocity," reported Ensign Maria Lopes from her station, her fingers dancing across the control panel. Jake's brow furrowed. "Can you identify its origin or intentions?" Maria shook her head, her dark eyes reflecting concern. "No identifiable markers. It's not responding to our hails either." Before Jake could issue further commands, the Odyssey shook violently, throwing crew members off balance. The lights flickered, and the hum of the engines wavered ominously. "Shields are down. We've been hit by some kind of energy pulse," shouted Chief Engineer Davis over the comms, his voice strained. Jake clenched his fists. "Initiate evasive maneuvers and prepare for possible boarding. All crew to defensive positions." The crew scrambled into action, the well-practiced drills kicking in as they armed themselves and took cover behind consoles and bulkheads. The tension was palpable, every second stretching into eternity as they awaited the unknown. A piercing blue light erupted in the center of the control room, coalescing into a swirling vortex. Jake shielded his eyes, trying to make sense of the phenomenon. From the vortex emerged a tall, slender figure adorned in sleek, metallic armor that shimmered with iridescent hues. The intruder's skin had a subtle lavender tint and large, luminescent eyes that scanned the room with calculated curiosity. "Stand down," Jake ordered, aiming his plasma pistol at the alien figure. The rest of the crew followed suit, weapons trained and ready. The alien tilted her head, seemingly unfazed by the display of force. She raised a delicate four-fingered hand, and with a swift motion, all the weapons were ripped from the crew's grasp by an invisible force, clattering harmlessly to the floor. Jake's eyes widened in shock as he felt an unseen pressure holding him in place. The alien's gaze settled on him, and she spoke in a melodic yet commanding tone. "Identify yourself, intruder." "Intruder? You're the one who boarded our ship uninvited," Jake retorted, struggling against the immobilizing force. The alien's expression shifted to one of confusion. "This sector falls under the jurisdiction of the Aurelian Empire. You are trespassing in restricted space." Maria stepped forward cautiously, her voice steady. "We were not aware of any territorial claims in this region. We come from Earth on a peaceful mission of exploration and diplomacy." The alien's eyes flickered with interest at the mention of Earth, the pressure holding Jake and the crew eased slightly. "Earth, the planet of humans. Records of your kind are scarce." Jake took a deep breath, sensing an opportunity to defuse the situation. "Yes, we're humans. And who might you be?" She straightened, exuding an air of authority. "I am Commander Lyra of the Aurelian Imperial Fleet. Your unauthorized presence requires immediate explanation." Before Jake could respond, another alarm blared throughout the ship. Maria's console flashed with urgent warnings. "Commander, multiple Aurelian ships are converging on our location. They're charging weapons." Lyra's composure faltered for a moment as she accessed a device on her wrist. Her eyes widened in surprise. "This can't be right. My fleet was not scheduled to be in this sector." Suddenly, the ship lurched again as enemy fire struck its hull. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the lights dimmed precariously. Lyra's face hardened as she assessed the situation. "It appears we have a mutual enemy," Jake said, meeting her gaze. "Perhaps we can help each other." Lyra hesitated, weighing her options as the ship sustained another hit. The walls groaned under the strain, and emergency systems struggled to keep up. "Very well, human," she conceded. A temporary alliance for survival. Jake nodded, extending his hand instinctively. Lyra looked at it quizzically before mimicking the gesture, her touch cool and firm. "Let's get to work," Jake declared, moving towards the central console. "Maria, plot an escape course. Davis, divert all available power to the engines and shields. Commander Lyra, any assistance you can provide would be appreciated." Lyra moved beside him, her fingers flying over the controls with expert precision. "I can modify your deflector arrays to withstand their plasma torpedoes, but we'll need to act swiftly." As the unlikely team coordinated their efforts, the Odyssey roared back to life, engines flaring as it maneuvered through the barrage of enemy fire. The collaboration between human and alien sparked a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos, setting the stage for an adventure neither could have anticipated. As the Odyssey dodged another volley of plasma torpedoes, the ship's structure groaned under the strain. Jake kept his eyes on the holographic display, watching as the enemy ships closed in. "Shields at 40%. We can't take much more of this." Davis's voice crackled over the comms. "Understood, Chief," Jake responded, gritting his teeth. He turned to Lyra, who was working on the deflector arrays with incredible speed. "How much longer?" Lyra's iridescent eyes narrowed in concentration as she made final adjustments. "Almost there. Your technology is primitive, but it will suffice for now." With a final keystroke, Lyra stepped back. "Done. Your deflectors are now attuned to their plasma frequency. We should be able to repel their next attack." Jake nodded, turning his attention back to the enemy ships. "Maria, are we ready to jump to hyperspace?" Maria's hands flew over the controls as she plotted an escape course. "Almost. Got it. Course laid in. We just need a few more seconds to charge the drive." "We might not have that long," Jake muttered, watching as the enemy ships prepared to fire again. Just as the enemy torpedoes launched, the Odyssey's deflectors flared with a new intensity. The torpedoes struck the shields, but instead of penetrating, they were absorbed and dispersed harmlessly into space. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief. "Nice work, Commander," Jake said, glancing at Lyra. Lyra gave a slight nod. It was a necessary adaptation. "Jump drive ready," Maria announced. "Do it," Jake ordered. The stars outside the viewport stretched into lines of light as the Odyssey surged into hyperspace, leaving the enemy fleet behind. The tension in the control room finally eased as the ship hurtled through the void at faster-than-light speed. Jake slumped into his chair, running a hand through his hair. That was too close. Maria smiled weakly, her fingers still hovering over the controls. "I'll take a close call over the alternative any day." Lyra remained standing, her posture rigid, though her expression was thoughtful. "Your ship performed better than I expected, given the circumstances." "High praise coming from someone who nearly tore it apart," Jake replied with a wry smile. Lyra's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Consider it a test of your resilience." Jake chuckled, then turned serious. "We need to figure out what just happened. Why was your fleet attacking us? And who else is out here that we need to worry about?" Lyra's expression darkened. "Something is amiss. My fleet was not scheduled to be in this sector, and they certainly would not have fired on my command vessel without cause. Could they have been hacked? Or maybe you're dealing with a rogue faction?" Maria suggested. Lyra considered this. "It's possible. There have been whispers of dissent within the Empire, but nothing concrete, until now." Jake leaned forward. "Whatever the reason, we're in this together for now. We need to stay ahead of whoever's after us and figure out what they're planning. Do you have any safe locations we can regroup?" Lyra nodded slowly. "There is a remote outpost on the edge of the Hadean Nebula. It is a listening post, designed to be undetectable. We can lay low there and assess the situation." Jake glanced at Maria, who nodded in agreement. "All right. Set the course, and let's hope this alliance of ours holds." As the Odyssey altered course, the tension in the room gradually gave way to a tentative understanding. Two commanders, human and alien, now shared a common goal: survival. Their unexpected encounter had set them on a path filled with uncertainty, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning of an adventure that would challenge their perceptions, test their resolve, and forge bonds that neither could have anticipated. As the stars continued to blur past the viewport, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was the start of something much larger than any of them could imagine. The Odyssey hurtled through hyperspace, the hum of the engines a steady background to the tense silence in the control room. Jake sat in his command chair, his mind racing with possibilities. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the star-streaked view ahead. Despite the apparent calm, the air between them crackled with unspoken questions and mutual wariness. "How far to the outpost?" Jake asked, breaking the silence. Maria glanced at her console. "We should arrive in about 20 minutes. "Good," Jake said, turning to Lyra. "Once we get there, we'll need to do a full systems check and figure out our next move." Lyra gave a curt nod. "Agreed. However, I must access my own communication channels to contact the Imperial Command. I need to confirm what has happened and why my fleet was in this sector." Jake studied her for a moment, weighing his options. "We'll make sure you're able to do that. But I need to know that we can trust you, Commander. We're both in a precarious situation, and any misstep could be fatal for both our crews." Lyra's expression remained inscrutable. Trust is a fragile concept, especially between those who were strangers mere moments ago. "But know this, Lieutenant Carter. I value the lives of my crew as much as you value yours. If an alliance is what it takes to survive, then you have my cooperation." Jake held her gaze, searching for any sign of deception, but found only determination. He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Let's make it through this together." The minutes ticked by intense anticipation until the ship finally exited hyperspace. The star streaks coalesced into the familiar pinpricks of light, revealing a vast nebula of swirling reds and purples. The Hadean Nebula loomed ahead, a chaotic cloud of gas and dust, with occasional flashes of light as stars were born or died within its depths. Maria carefully navigated the ship toward the designated coordinates. As they approached the outpost, a small structure became visible, nestled within the nebula's protective embrace. It was an unassuming station, its dull gray exterior almost blending in with the surrounding cosmic clouds. "We've arrived," Maria announced, her voice tinged with relief. "No signs of pursuit." Jake nodded, standing up from his chair. "Good. Let's dock and assess the situation. Davis, I want a full diagnostic of the ship. Maria, see if you can access any local communications. And Commander Lyra," he added, turning to her, "I'll escort you to our secure comms room, so you can contact your people." Lyra inclined her head in agreement. "Lead the way." As Jake and Lyra left the control room, the remaining crew members exchanged glances, their unease palpable. The alliance was tenuous at best, and everyone knew it. Jake guided Lyra through the corridors of the Odyssey, the ship's emergency lighting casting long shadows on the walls. The journey was quiet, each step echoing in the stillness, until they reached the secure communications room. Jake keyed in a code, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. "You'll have privacy here," Jake said, gesturing to the console. "But I'll need to monitor the transmission for security reasons. I'm sure you understand." Lyra raised an eyebrow but made no objection. She stepped inside, and Jake followed, standing by the door as she activated the console. Her fingers danced across the controls, inputting encrypted codes and accessing restricted channels. As the transmission connected, a holographic image flickered to life. It was a tall, stern-looking Aurelian male, his armor gleaming in the faint light. His eyes narrowed as he recognized Lyra. "Commander Lyra, explain your unauthorized absence from your assigned sector," the Aurelian demanded, his voice cold and commanding. "Admiral Thaler," Lyra began, her tone steady. "There has been a breach in protocol. My vessel was ambushed, and I was separated from my fleet. I believe there is a rogue faction within the Empire, acting without orders. Feller's eyes flickered with surprise, but he quickly masked it with a scowl. These are serious accusations, Commander. Do you have evidence? Lyra glanced at Jake briefly before responding. I do not have conclusive proof, but the events that transpired cannot be explained by normal chain of command. I am currently allied with a human vessel that was also attacked without provocation. Together, we seek to uncover the truth. The Admiral's gaze shifted to Jake, his expression unreadable. The human. This complicates matters. Indeed, Lyra agreed. But our priority is survival and uncovering the source of these attacks. I request authorization to continue this alliance until the situation is resolved. Feller was silent for a moment, his holographic form flickering slightly. Very well, Commander. You are authorized to proceed as you see fit, but be warned. Failure will not be tolerated. I will expect regular updates. Understood, Admiral, Lyra said, giving a respectful nod. The transmission ended, and the hologram vanished, leaving the room in silence once more. Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Well, that went better than expected, he remarked. Lyra turned to him, her expression unreadable. The situation is more dire than I anticipated. We are both walking a dangerous path, Lieutenant Carter. I suggest we tread carefully. Jake nodded in agreement. We'll do what we have to do. For now, let's focus on repairing the ship and preparing for whatever comes next. As they left the comms room, the weight of their precarious alliance hung heavy in the air. Trust was a luxury neither could afford, yet they were bound by necessity. The true test of their partnership lay ahead, in the uncharted depths of space and the tangled web of intrigue that threatened to ensnare them both. The docking process at the outpost was smooth, the Odyssey's damaged systems cooperating just enough to ensure a safe arrival. Once secured, the crew wasted no time disembarking. The outpost, though small and unassuming, offered the basic facilities they needed to conduct repairs, and more importantly, gather intelligence. Jake and Lyra stepped onto the metal deck of the outpost, the air around them cool and slightly stale from disuse. A few automated systems hummed quietly in the background, and dim lights flickered along the corridors. This place gives me the creeps, Davis muttered as he joined them, his eyes scanning the area warily. It's a bit rundown, but it's functional, Jake replied. We won't be here long. Davis, take the engineering team and start those diagnostics. I want to know what we're dealing with as soon as possible. Aye, sir, Davis said with a nod before heading off, his tools clanking softly with each step. Jake turned to Maria, who was already at a console, working to establish communications. Any luck? He asked. Maria frowned, her fingers flying over the controls. I'm picking up some strange interference, but I should be able to clean it up. Give me a few more minutes. Do it, Jake said, then looked at Lyra. We should talk. Lyra met his gaze, her expression cool but attentive. Agreed. Lead the way. Jake led her to a small, empty briefing room nearby. Once inside, he closed the door behind them and activated the room's privacy shields, ensuring their conversation wouldn't be overheard. We need to be on the same page, Lyra, Jake began, leaning against the edge of the table. You said you suspect a rogue faction within your empire. What exactly are we dealing with here? Lyra crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing as she considered her response. The Aurelian Empire is vast, with many factions vying for power. Not all of them are loyal to the current empress. Some seek to carve out their own domains, using any means necessary. The fact that my fleet was in this sector without my knowledge suggests that someone with significant influence is moving pieces on the board. And you think they're targeting humans specifically? Jake asked. It's possible, Lyra replied. Humans are relatively new to the galactic stage, and your rapid expansion has drawn attention. Some might see you as a threat to be neutralized before you become too powerful. Others might see you as potential allies or pawns. Jake grimaced. Great, so we're caught in the middle of an Aurelian power struggle. Precisely, Lyra said, her voice laced with a hint of frustration. Which is why we must be cautious. Trust no one except those who have proven themselves. Jake nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. What about your crew? Can they be trusted? Lyra hesitated, then gave a small nod. They are loyal to me, but they may not all agree with my decisions. Some might prefer to align with the traditionalists within the Empire, rather than form an alliance with humans. I will need to manage them carefully. Understood, Jake said, appreciating her honesty. We'll need to watch each other's backs. I'm not thrilled about this situation, but if we're going to survive, we need to work together. Lyra's expression softened slightly, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. Agreed, Lieutenant Carter. Our alliance may be born of necessity, but it does not have to be adversarial. Before Jake could respond, the door to the briefing room slid open, and Maria rushed in, her face pale with urgency. Commander, Lieutenant, we have a problem, she said, her voice tight. I managed to clear up the interference, but I picked up a transmission from a nearby ship. It's an Aurelian vessel, but they're not responding to our hails. An Aurelian ship? Lyra asked, her eyes narrowing. Yes, and they're heavily armed, Maria confirmed. They're holding position just outside the nebula, but they're not making any aggressive moves yet. I think they're waiting for something. Jake exchanged a tense look with Lyra. Could they be the ones who ambushed us? It's possible, Lyra replied, her tone grim. Or they could be reinforcements sent by the Admiral. We can't be sure without direct contact. Well, we can't just sit here and wait for them to decide our fate, Jake said decisively. We need to prepare for the worst. Maria nodded. I've already alerted the crew. We're on full defensive alert, but the outpost's defenses are minimal. We won't last long if they decide to attack. Jake turned to Lyra. Any suggestions? Lyra's eyes flicked to the console displaying the incoming vessel's data. We need to buy time. If this ship is part of a larger force, they might hesitate to engage if they think we have reinforcements on the way. I suggest sending a signal, an encrypted transmission that suggests we have backup en route. It might be enough to make them think twice. Jake considered her plan, then nodded. It's worth a shot. Maria, can you handle that? Maria smiled faintly. Piece of cake. I'll get it done. As Maria left the room to implement the plan, Jake turned back to Lyra. If this doesn't work, we may have to fight our way out of here. I'm aware, Lyra said, her voice steady. But know this, Lieutenant. If it comes to that, I will stand with you and your crew. We are allies now, and I do not break my word. Jake felt a flicker of something, perhaps respect, perhaps hope, at her words. Then let's hope it doesn't come to that. But if it does, we'll make sure they regret underestimating us. The tension in the room was thick as they prepared for whatever would come next. The shadows of betrayal loomed large, but in the uncertain depths of space, an alliance, no matter how fragile, was their best chance at survival. Together, they would face the storm, determined to uncover the truth and ensure that neither human nor Aurelian would fall prey to the machinations of those who sought to tear them apart. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness as the crew of the Odyssey braced for whatever was to come. The outpost's dim corridors buzzed with nervous energy, every member of the crew keenly aware that their next move could determine whether they lived or died. The Aurelian ship, still hovering on the edge of their sensors, loomed like a specter of impending doom. In the control room, Jake stood beside Maria as she worked on the transmission. Her fingers tapped rapidly on the console, crafting an encrypted signal designed to give the impression that a human fleet was inbound. Lyra hovered nearby, her eyes fixed on the data streaming across the screen. Almost there, Maria muttered, her voice tense. Just a few more seconds. Jake's gaze flicked to the tactical display, showing the Aurelian ship, It hadn't moved, but its position was too close for comfort. "We need this to work, Maria." "No pressure." Maria shot him a quick, humorless smile. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Commander." Lyra leaned in, her voice calm yet urgent. "Make sure the encryption is strong. If they decode the message too quickly, they'll know it's a bluff." "Don't worry," Maria said. "I'm using an old Alliance cipher. It should be enough to keep them guessing." "Good," Jake said, though his nerves were far from settled. "Let's send it." Maria took a deep breath and pressed a final key. Message sent. Now we wait. The seconds stretched into an eternity as they watched the Aurelian vessel on the monitor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the ship began to move, slowly at first, but then with increasing speed. "They're changing course," Maria reported, her voice tinged with relief. "Looks like they're pulling back." Jake exhaled the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank God. How long until they're out of range?" "Another minute or so, but they're definitely retreating," Maria said, the tension in her shoulders easing. Jake turned to Lyra. It worked. They'd bought the bluff. Lyra nodded, though her expression remained guarded. "For now. But they'll regroup and return, likely with more ships. We need to be ready." Jake agreed, but the immediate crisis averted gave him a moment to think more strategically. "We need more information. If there's a rogue faction targeting both of us, we can't just sit here waiting to be picked off." "Agreed," Lyra said. "There's a communications relay in this sector that might hold valuable intel. It's an old Aurelian outpost, abandoned after the last border conflict, but it could still have access to military channels." Jake considered this. "If we can get to that relay, we might be able to figure out who's behind these attacks and why." "It's a risk," Lyra cautioned. "If they're monitoring it, we could walk right into a trap." "We're already in a trap," Jake said grimly. "But if there's a chance we can turn the tables, it's worth it." Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment, there was a shared understanding between them. A recognition of the stakes they were facing and the slim margins they had to work with. "Then we'll take that chance," she said, her voice firm. Jake nodded, then turned to Maria. "Get Davis back here and prep the Odyssey for departure. I want us ready to move as soon as possible." "On it," Maria said, already opening a comm channel to the engineering team. As Maria relayed the orders, Jake and Lyra remained by the console, their thoughts running parallel tracks. They were allies now, bound by circumstance and the shadow of a greater enemy. But trust was a fragile thing, especially in the unforgiving void of space. "Lyra," Jake began, his voice lower now that they were alone. "When we reach that relay, I need to know I can count on you. No second guessing, no hidden agendas. If we're going to survive this, we need to trust each other." Lyra's gaze was steady, her expression unreadable. "I understand your concerns, Jake, but know this. I have as much to lose as you do. If my people are truly being manipulated, I cannot let that stand. We may come from different worlds, but in this fight, we are united by a common goal." Jake studied her for a moment, then gave a single nod. "Let's hope that's enough." With the course set and the crew on high alert, the Odyssey prepared to leave the relative safety of the outposts behind. As the engines hummed to life, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something much bigger than any of them had anticipated. The storm was gathering, and soon, it would break over them with full force. But whatever lay ahead, betrayal, battle, or something even more dangerous, Jake and Lyra knew one thing for certain. They were in this together, and together, they might just have a chance. The Odyssey surged forward through the void, the repaired systems humming with renewed vigor. The crew was on edge, their earlier relief replaced by a palpable sense of urgency. As the ship approached the coordinates for the abandoned Aurelian outpost, Jake, Lyra, and the rest of the crew knew that their next move could be pivotal. The outpost, relic of a bygone era, loomed ahead like a derelict sentinel, It was a large structure, its once proud silhouette now marred by the ravages of time and neglect. The exterior was battered and scarred, with chunks missing from its surface, giving it a haunting, forlorn appearance. The Odyssey approached cautiously, scanning for any signs of activity or traps. Approaching the outpost, Maria announced, her fingers dancing over the console. "No signs of immediate threats. We should be able to dock with minimal interference." Jake nodded, glancing at Lyra. "What can you tell us about this place? Any particular dangers we should be aware of?" Lyra's gaze remained focused on the outpost. The relay itself should be intact, but the outpost may have automated defenses still active. "We'll need to proceed with caution." The Odyssey docked with the outpost's docking port, and the crew began preparing for the boarding operation. Jake, Lyra, Maria, and a small team of engineers geared up for the mission, their faces set with determination. They moved through the airlock and into the dark, cold corridors of the outpost, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. The interior was eerily quiet, illuminated only by the soft glow of their portable lights. Dust and debris coated every surface, and the air was musty with the smell of disuse. Jake led the way, with Lyra beside him, her eyes scanning for any signs of hidden threats. As they ventured deeper into the outpost, they came across a control room, its once sophisticated equipment now in disrepair. Jake and Maria began working to interface with the ancient systems, attempting to access the relay's data archives. "Looks like the power's still functional, but the systems are a bit of a mess," Maria commented, her fingers moving quickly over the controls. "I'll need a few minutes to get it online." Lyra stood watch, her senses attuned to any changes in their environment. "I'll monitor for any signs of incoming ships or automated defenses." Jake joined Maria at the console, peering over her shoulder as she worked. The screens flickered to life, revealing a tangle of corrupted files and damaged data structures. "This is going to be a challenge," Maria said, her brow furrowing. "It's like trying to read a book with half the pages missing." "We need to salvage whatever we can," Jake said, his voice resolute. "The information here could be crucial." As Maria began to sift through the data, the outpost suddenly trembled with a low rumble. The lights flickered, and a harsh alarm blared throughout the structure. "That can't be good," Maria said, her voice tinged with alarm. "We've triggered something." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "I'll check the sensors." Before she could move, a series of automated turrets emerged from hidden compartments in the walls, their targeting systems locking onto the intruders. Energy pulses began to streak across the room, forcing the team into hasty cover. "Return fire," Jake shouted, his weapon blazing as he aimed at the turrets. "Maria, how's the data coming along?" "Almost there," Maria replied, her hands flying over the controls. "Just need a few more seconds." Lyra's precision shots disabled a couple of the turrets, but the automated defenses were relentless. The room was filled with the whine of energy weapons and the clang of metal as the team fought back. Finally, Maria let out a triumphant cry. "I've accessed the main archive. Downloading the data now." Jake continued to provide cover, his heart pounding with the adrenaline of combat. "Hurry up, Maria." With the last of the data downloading, Maria pulled the portable drive from the console and signaled to the team. "Got it. Let's get out of here." Jake led the retreat, covering their exit as the remaining turrets continued to fire sporadically. The team made their way back to the Odyssey, their breaths coming in short, sharp bursts. Once safely aboard the ship, Jake took a deep breath and gave a nod of approval. "Well done, everyone. Let's get out of here and analyze the data." In the relative safety of the Odyssey's control room, Jake, Maria, and Lyra gathered around a console as the data was decrypted and analyzed. The archive contained extensive communications, reports, and directives from the Aurelian Empire. Among the documents were plans and intelligence indicating that the recent attacks were not the work of a single rogue faction, but rather a coordinated effort by a shadowy coalition seeking to destabilize both the Aurelian Empire and humanity. "This is bigger than we thought," Lyra said, her voice grim as she reviewed the information. "It seems there are multiple factions involved, each with their own agendas. They're working together to create chaos." Jake nodded, the weight of the revelation settling on him. "If we're going to counter this threat, we need to understand their endgame and find a way to stop them. We can't do it alone." Lyra's gaze was resolute. "Then we must forge new alliances, not only between our two peoples but with any who stand against this threat. It's the only way to ensure our survival." Jake agreed. "We'll start by reaching out to the Aurelian leadership and our own command. It's time to unite against a common enemy." With their next steps clear, the crew of the Odyssey prepared for the arduous journey ahead. The stakes had never been higher, and the path forward would be fraught with challenges. But together, human and Aurelian, they were ready to face the storm and fight for a future where both their worlds could survive and thrive. The Odyssey's engines roared as the ship left the abandoned Aurelian outpost behind, heading towards the nearest Aurelian outpost that had functioning communications. Jake, Lyra, Maria, and the rest of the crew worked tirelessly to decode and analyze the data they had retrieved. The information revealed that the shadowy coalition threatening both humanity and the Aurelian Empire had been meticulously planning their attacks, aiming to create a power vacuum that they could exploit. Lyra had been in constant communication with her superiors, seeking guidance and coordinating their response. The situation was dire, and time was of the essence. As the Odyssey approached the Aurelian outpost designated for high-priority communications, the crew prepared for a diplomatic mission that could potentially turn the tide in their struggle. The outpost, known as Varelia Station, was a sleek, high-tech facility orbiting a remote planet. Its design was a stark contrast to the dilapidated Aurelian outpost they had just left. The station's bright lights and polished exterior gave off an air of advanced sophistication, and as the Odyssey docked, the crew was met with a team of well-equipped Aurelian guards. "Welcome aboard, Commander Lyra," said the station's chief officer, a tall, imposing Aurelian named Tarek. "We have been expecting you, and you must be the humans who assisted her." Jake extended a hand. "Lieutenant Jake Carter, of the Odyssey. We appreciate the warm welcome." Tarek's eyes lingered on Jake's hand for a moment before he nodded and gestured for them to follow. "Please, come with me. We have much to discuss." Inside Varelia Station, they were led to a high-tech briefing room where a large holographic display showcased various strategic points and star maps. A group of Aurelian officials, including the high-ranking Admiral Valeria, awaited their arrival. "Commander Lyra, Lieutenant Carter, welcome," Admiral Valeria said, her tone formal but welcoming. "We have reviewed the data you retrieved from the outpost. It confirms our worst fears." Jake stepped forward. "We need to understand the full scope of the threat. Can you provide any additional information on these factions and their plans?" Admiral Valeria nodded, her fingers tapping the controls on the display. "These factions have been working in the shadows for years, manipulating events to create instability. Their ultimate goal is to seize control of the Aurelian Empire and humanity's burgeoning territories, creating a new power structure under their control." Lyra interjected, her voice tense. "The coalition's activities are coordinated, with each faction playing a specific role. They've been using misinformation and sabotage to turn us against each other." Valeria's eyes narrowed. "Yes, their strategy involves sowing discord and mistrust. The recent attacks are only the beginning. They aim to destabilize our defenses and isolate us from potential allies." Maria, who had been analyzing data from the station's network, looked up. "It seems their next move is aimed at a major supply hub near the Aurelian homeworld. If they succeed, it could cripple your entire supply line and create a massive logistical nightmare." Jake glanced at Lyra, and then back at Valeria. "We need to coordinate our efforts and counter this attack before it happens. If we work together, we can preempt their plans and protect both our peoples. Valeria considered this for a moment before nodding. Very well, we will provide you with the necessary intelligence and resources, but we need to act quickly. The coalition's forces are already mobilizing. The briefing room buzzed with activity as the crew and Aurelian officials began to formulate a plan. They focused on intercepting and neutralizing the coalition's forces before they could strike the supply hub. The plan involved a combined effort between human and Aurelian forces, leveraging both technological prowess and strategic acumen. As preparations were underway, Jake and Lyra found a moment to speak privately. "Do you think we can really pull this off?" Lyra asked, her voice low. Jake met her gaze with a determined expression. "We have to. We've seen what's at stake. If we don't stop them now, it could be the end for both of us." Lyra nodded. "Agreed. I'm counting on you and your crew. We're all in this together." With their plans set, the Odyssey and the Aurelian forces prepared for a high-stakes operation. The combined fleet set out toward the supply hub, ready to confront the coalition's forces head-on. The battle would be fierce, but with their newfound alliance, Jake, Lyra, and their respective crews were determined to fight for their future and protect their worlds from the looming threat.